Hello everyone, my name is Eric Marcoux, and today I'm going to be doing a quick workshop on the watsonx Orchestrate Agent Developer Kit. So what is the Agent Developer Kit? The Agent Developer Kit enables users to create low and pro code setups to build, evaluate, and deploy agents as code directly from your CLI into watsonx Orchestrate. You can write them once and run them everywhere, from your laptop to SaaS or on-prem, and you can integrate them with your CI/CD pipelines. What do you need to get started? Well, the first thing you'll need is a trial of watsonx Orchestrate, which you can get from the link above or by scanning the QR code to the right. You'll need a Docker engine. We would recommend Rancher or Kalima, and Python version 3.11 to 13 at the time of writing. You'll also need the Agent Developer Kit, which you can get by running pip install upgrade IBM watsonx Orchestrate. So let's get in and actually look at what the ADK does and what it can do for you. So the first thing you'll notice after installing the Orchestrate CLI is you'll have a new command called Orchestrate. Orchestrate comes with a number of different utilities. The first one is called env, or environments. Environments are the way of pointing your ADK to either your local machine or to a different SaaS environment. We'll show that later. You'll see a command for agents, tools, toolkits, knowledge bases, connections, models, and so on. And we'll go through each of these. So let's start by trying to build our first tool. So build our first agent. Agents within the ADK are defined through YAML manifest files. So here's an example of one. Here I'll build a React agent, and I'm going to call it customer care agent. This agent is going to use an LLM of Llama 3.290B Vision Instruct. And to build an agent, I will need both a description and a set of instructions for my agent. The description is for users to find your agent and understand what it's for, but additionally, it is how the agent describes itself to other agents. So that way, a parent agent can decide whether or not it needs to talk to that agent to have some work done. There'll be one or more instructions that you can provide in natural language. Here you'll see I have one or more tools that the agent may want to use, and it describes when and why it should use them, how it should use them, and how it should combine results. Then there are collaborators. Collaborators are other agents which this agent may wish to talk to in order to fill a task. In this case, there's one. It's the ServiceNow agent. And we'll show that in a second. Finally, there's a list of tools. So tools are the core functionality of the agent that makes it actually be able to do something. So here's an agent. I will show you now how one goes about building a tool. So within the ADK, a tool is simply any Python function that you wanted to write, and you annotate it with an @tool annotation. Then you'll be able to import that tool by running orchestrate tools import, pointed at the file, additionally pointed at your requirements file. And this will go and upload that tool into the runtime, available to any agent that wishes to use it. Currently, this is happening locally on my laptop, but we can also use this to import tools into production as well. Tools, at times, will need access to connection details. A connection is a reference to a remote service that includes the URL to the service and, for example, API keys, username and password, or they can even be key value connections for anything that is an arbitrary dictionary that you need to pass along to your tool for it to do its job. When I create this tool, I can then simply, within the tool, reference it by saying, I would like this is a Snow connection, and I would like the credits for that connection. Then I can then, within my authentication, specify the username and password that I would like to pass along with the request. So let's see a full flow of importing an agent. Here we'll see I have a script called importall.sh, and this is a very common pattern that we use in the ADK, so you can repeatedly create and import agents. The first thing I'll do is I will import a connection. This connection is called ServiceNow. I configure it in two different environments. I configure it in draft and live. The draft environment is what I will use in the ADK. The live environment is what I will use in production. I then include the URL to the server, and I specify that this is a basic credential. You'll notice there are no credentials actually within this connection. That's because those credentials come from a second command called set credentials. And the reason behind this is we want users to not accidentally check credentials into source code, and so we force you to do those separately. So the first thing I'll do is I'll import my connection. I will set my credentials. I will then import all of my Python tools, and finally I will import my agents. So I will do this now. And while this is running, I will run orchestrate chat start. And this will launch a local version of watsonx Orchestrate on my machine. I can then immediately go begin to talk to that agent to have it do things. So show my open claims. And this will go and it will make a request out to an external server that I have to try and get all of my open customer care claims, for example, for a hospital. So you'll see it's called the tool, it's thinking, and now I got back my claims. And you'll see in here, the reason why this returned as a table is because in the agent definition, I explicitly asked it to. So please return the results in a markdown formatted table. Python tools are extremely powerful. They'll let you build anything that you would want to integrate with as an upstream system. But in certain cases, they're a little bit too powerful and unnecessary. And so for those cases, you can actually create tools using an OpenAPI spec. In this case, there'd be no code for the user to have to write. Similar to an OpenAPI tool, similar to a Python tool, I can import an OpenAPI tool. And all that will happen here is instead of specifying that it is of type Python, it is of kind OpenAPI. And that tool is then immediately available within the runtime. So now if I refresh, I can select my healthcare agent and I can ask it, show the nearest healthcare providers to me. And this will go and it will do a search for the nearest healthcare providers. So it's going to ask what my location is. I'll say I'm in Boston. And this will now go and do a search based upon the query parameters of the location for jobs in Boston using that OpenAPI spec. And we'll see if we got back the list of providers, and it will return a response in just a second. Now, while we let that go, there's a response. So I was returning back a list of healthcare providers that we can use. So in addition to Python and OpenAPI tools, we also support the very common Model Context Protocol. So Model Context Protocol is a framework for building collections of tools, which we call toolkits. These can be found openly on the internet. And so what we have is native support for uploading an MCP server either from files or just directly from NPM or PyPy directly into the runtime. And if I run this, you'll see what we'll do is we will take your Python tool, take your MCP server, turn it into a toolkit, upload it into the runtime, and in just a second, our tools will import. And if I do an orchestrate tools list now, we will see I have two new tools created. One that's called Tably Extract and one that's called Tably Search, given this is a Tably MCP server. I had to write no code. This already existed. This is a common library that was written for any AI provider framework. I can now go and directly use that agent, and I can go and search for tell me about the history of IBM in AI. And without having to write any Python code, just using the MCP server that already existed, this will now go and search the internet for me via Tably and return back to us a result based upon the search results. And there's our answer. So in addition to tools, sometimes you need to work with things that are just natively intrinsically known by the model. And for this, we have what's known as a knowledge base. So a knowledge base is simply a collection of documents that are sitting on your system that you would like to associate with your agent. And so to do that, we'll simply specify the documents we want to upload. We'll specify the knowledge base that we want associated with our agent, and we will import that agent. And so now I should be able to go and ask the IBM agent, tell me about the history of IBM. And without having to write a RAG pipeline or any of that work, I now have a search engine that is capable of querying for the history of IBM across those two different documents. And we will see it also includes citations for where it found that information in those documents. In addition to Python tools, toolkits, MCP toolkits, you may also need to combine. There we go. There's our answer. That was a long one. So we see here the full history of IBM and its inventions. I can also go and click on the little up arrow, and I can see citations across all of the different documents. It highlights what it is responding to and where it found it. I can go click in, and I can see where that came from within the search or within the document that I originally uploaded. I may then need to create what's called a workflow. So a workflow is a way for users to create complex workflows, as the name would suggest, combining agents and tools together to solve some larger problem. These agents and tools are combined into a tool that can then be imported into your agent. So you'll see here, I have an agent that knows how to search for IBM knowledge, and I will ask that agent, please give me the answer based upon the provided question. Then I'll take the output of that, and I'll pass it along to a Python tool that I created called send emails, which is in this case just a dummy thing as if it were to send an email. In the future, you'll be able to schedule these via cron jobs. For now, they can be invoked via conversation. And these tools will be bound to your agent just like any other tool. So I want to send an email to their history of IBM. And this will take a bit longer because it's actually a multi-step process. It's going to go talk to that agent. That agent is now asynchronously processing the request across multiple different tool calls. So these can actually take longer than a normal tool call because they're executing multiple tools, and come back to me with an answer in just a second or so. The ADK is not limited to models specific to watsonx AI. We support natively importing custom models from a large number of different providers. Specifically, we'll support, there's our answer. We support OpenAI, Claude, Anthropic, any model from OpenRouter, and the list continues to grow. So a user can specify a connection to that provider, specify your credentials, add the model, and then use it as if it was a model that came with watsonx Orchestrate. So we'll see here if I run this, I can then go and create my agent, and the agent will use a model of virtual model, because all of our models that do not directly come from watsonx Orchestrate are called start with virtual model. That comes from an OpenAI, and that model is O4 Mini. So I can, in a second, talk to this agent via OpenAI. If you want to build something more complicated, you can actually combine multiple different models into a single quote-unquote model policy. And this model policy can do things like routing between models on fallback or routing between models in terms of load balancing. So where this is useful is if the model that you're working with goes down during execution, it'll fall back to the secondary and the user won't be any the wiser. So in this case, I'm routing between Sonnet 3.5 v2 and Sonnet 3.5. If the Sonnet 3.5 v2 model went out for whatever reason, hopefully the Sonnet 3.5 model is still up, it'll switch from the first to the second. For load balancing, I can do something similar. In this case, I'm using two virtual models, but really the use case you want to use here is for something like, for example, if you own dedicated hardware to run your LLM, you may want to send the majority of your traffic there, but only during times of high peak load, shed traffic off to a SaaS provider that can infinitely scale. So you can do that by creating a model policy. And again, you just reference the model policy by name, and it'll be available to your agent. So to show these two, I can now go and talk to my OpenAI agent. I can say, show my open claims. And this is going, it's making a tool call to get my claims. In just a second, OpenAI will respond. And we get back a response. We can do the same thing with Anthropic. Show my open claims. And in this case, it's going to try the first model. If it fails, fall back to the second. Make that same tool call. And we get back our answer from Anthropic. There we go. Excellent. So the last thing I want to show is evaluation. So built into the ADK is an evaluation framework where users can create stories. So a story is a collection of statements that the user wishes to ask. You can build these into a flow and ask them sequentially. I can then go and specify evaluation criteria. And this evaluation criteria is defined by a set of goals and a set of minefields. The goals specify actions we want to happen, and the minefields actions we do not want to happen. We can then use this to build up results. And so this one has no minefields. But if I were to run this, I can go and build a pipeline that I can now repeatedly run and validate whether or not my agent is improving or regressing before I import it into a production system. And so now, if I were to go and run my evaluation, it should go and generate evaluation results for me. Now, once I've gone and built out my agents and tools locally, I want to go and import those into a production environment. And so you'll see here, I have an instance of watsonx Orchestrate currently on cloud. I have API details that include a service instance URL and an API key. I will take those and I will run orchestrate in the add, and I will add that environment to my local system. And we'll see I have two. I've got one that's local and one that's tech day. If I orchestrate in the activate, activate tech day, all of the commands that I'm now running from this point forwards are against my SaaS instance. So again, I can go and import all of my Python tools and agents, as I've done previously. And I've now moved the work from my local machine where I've been working in isolation, not worried about breaking anyone, directly into a cloud environment. But you can see this exact same process in place for promoting to production environments from, for example, a staging production environment to a production environment. And those tools and agents will now show up within watsonx Orchestrate, under Agent Builder. And I see my customer care agent and my ServiceNow agent. And I can go and interact with those through the cloud as if I were to have done everything originally from the cloud. So that's all I have. And I guess now I'll open it up to questions. So the first question I see is knowledge a database? Can PDF documents be loaded into the knowledge graph without having to create embeddings? So Jeff, knowledge is a vector database. Natively, we integrate or build this up with Milvus. There is a built-in Milvus pipeline for ingesting knowledge. You can optionally instead point to an external Milvus or an external Elasticsearch and use those as your knowledge providers, and we will in turn put citations on top of those. But if you do not use the built-in knowledge provider, then you are responsible for creating the embeddings yourself. So we create them by default if you do it by documents, but if you point it at your own, then it's your responsibility for creating those documents. Thomas asks, do you know what is the repository he's working in from the official one? Yes, so the examples you'll see in here are also in that repository. I have a link that I will share back in my slideshow. For anyone that is interested, you can scan this QR code, and this will bring you to the repository itself. We'll also work with the coordinators to see if we can get a link in. Senkath asked, does activating and using Orchestrate require an API key? Where can I find this? Yes, excellent question. So you will need a SaaS instance of watsonx Orchestrate to download the developer editions to your local machine. So where you will find that is within watsonx Orchestrate. If you click on your name on the top right and you find a settings page, you will find under API details a service instance URL and a generate API key link that you'll need. Those will be provided using an env file, and you will provide a developer edition source of Orchestrate. You will provide the instance service URL that you had and what your API key was. That's all you need to get started, and the server start command will use that to hook everything else up for you. Mohammed asks, will this repo be made available after the workshop? Yes, I will make sure that that link is shared. Gagan asked, when setting out to build a custom agent, are we working with the templates provided by Orchestrate? If so, can you talk a little bit about the phase of development? So it does not hurt to start with one of our templates. So there are the examples that I'm sharing here. There is also an examples folder within the IBM watsonx Orchestrate ADK repo. Both of those are great to get started, to get your feet wet and learn how agents work. What you can do beyond that is we have a set of what we call domain agents, which will be rolling out shortly. This is a large collection of pre-built catalog agents that a user can use, play with, and interact with. Within the ADK, we actually have a command that's called Orchestrate Tools Export or Orchestrate Agents Export, and you can use this to export the agent from your SaaS instance down to your local machine and see exactly how it was built. So that's a good thing to play with as well to start to learn. Although I'm very new to Sarah asked, great session, although I'm very new to watsonx Orchestrate dev kit, I would like to go through it again. Can you please suggest a good starting phase? Yes. So a good place to get started is to check out this examples repo that I shared, or on the ADK, the github.com/IBM watsonx Orchestrate ADK repo. There is an examples folder, and within there, you'll see examples of the customer care agent that I'm sharing, a planner version of the customer care agent, a healthcare version, the knowledge examples. We have examples of Flow Builder. So those are all great to get started with to start learning. Kathy asked, how do you deploy this to production? So once you have gone and built out your agents using the ADK, you will have on your file system a collection of agent definitions in YAML format. You'll have a collection of connections, again, in YAML format, collection of tools in YAML format. You built it all locally. You've deployed it to your local environment. There is a command called orchestrate env. And within the orchestrate env command, there are a couple of subcommands. One of them is add, remove, or list. So what you can do is you can orchestrate env add the service instance URL that you had to your production instance, activate that production instance, and then as we've shown earlier, when you run your import all, because this is now active within the production instance, your agent definitions and your tools will show up within production. How can I integrate my own tools into the, Thomas, another question for Eric. Can I use my Orchestrate agents within my own web page? Since Orchestrate agents import, I only send it to IBM Cloud, but I cannot call it as a service. For example, I'd like to try it with a Salesforce Lightning Web Component since it's a good integration. So I'm not sure if you mean integrating it via the web. So we do have a command that you can use that's called orchestrate channels chat embed. And if you run that, what was one of the agents that I had? Customer care agent. It will generate for you an embed code that you can dump into your website to integrate the web chat with your website. If you didn't want to integrate it with your website, we also have built into the ADK. If you go to localhost 4321 docs, we have Swagger docs for all of our different APIs. There are two APIs that you can use to interact with Orchestrate. One of them is the runs API, and this will allow you to use our native, more powerful API that does asynchronous chat. And then we also have, for teams that don't want to have tight integration with Orchestrate, a chat completions API that is compatible with OpenAPI that you can also point at your agent and ask questions of. Jeff, can I integrate my own tools into the workflow if it's Python-based? Yes. Any Python function that you could write can be imported as a Python tool, and you can then add that tool to your agent and use it. Can this be run in a sandbox or a code base hosted in the cloud? So can it be added to a sandbox or a code base hosted in the cloud? The agents themselves, IBM watsonx Orchestrate has a SaaS offering, both on IBM Cloud and AWS. It also is soon to have a CPD offering for on-prem. Any of your agents and tools you can import into either that SaaS environment or the production environment using that env activate command and then importing the agent or the tool. As for hosting it in a VM, that's not officially supported. Narendhar asked, how do we point to local LLMs? So the model adds command also has support for OLLAMA out of the box. So if you wanted to run them locally, you can run it with OLLAMA. We also have support for VLLM. So if you have large infrastructure for running on real NVIDIA GPUs, you could run a VLLM and then use OpenAI as your provider. And then you can, inside of your connection, specify a custom URL that points to VLLM, and that will allow you to talk to VLLM. Or you can use OLLAMA if it's just on your laptop. Do I use the same, Kathy asked, do I use the same RAG built-in library to connect to my own vector store? Yes. So if you use a knowledge base, you'll be able to point it at your own Milvus or Elasticsearch, and you'll get all of the native capabilities that we have for citations out of the box. You'll just need to return results. Relatively soon, we'll also support custom search. Custom search will allow you to call an arbitrary endpoint with the query, and then you can return your own results, and we'll do citations on your behalf. Patricia asked, do you plan on supporting Node.js also, or just Python? So today, we only support Python directly. For toolkits with MCP, the MCP toolkits can either be written in Python or Node.js. Those are both compatible. Can I connect it to endpoints in AWS? Yes, we do natively support Orchestrate instances in AWS. You'll just add the environment on AWS and connect to it that way. The demo I shown earlier with the import, that was actually against an AWS tenant. But you could do the exact same thing with IBM Cloud. Samrath asks, chunking is happening by default number of tokens. Can we set tokens by our own? I'm actually not entirely certain of the answer on that. I believe it's done based upon max tokens that can be sent based upon the context size, but I'm not an expert in that area. Can I select an embedding model when using when building with Milvus? Yes, you can. And we also support embedding models added through that gateway that I had shown earlier. And is it possible to run on OpenShift? It's possible to run on OpenShift through CPD. So we have the Cloud Pak for Data, and within the Cloud Pak for Data, we will soon have an offering for watsonx Orchestrate, and this ADK can import tools and agents into that. But I think that's all I have for now. Thank you, everyone.